It just comes down to intention, just doing whatever you're doing with intention, because otherwise you're just going to move an inch in 14 different directions versus a mile straight ahead. And that's the goal.
Hey, it's Ben Wise, and this is The Fitness Movement. Fitness Movement is brought to you by Zor Fitness. Zor Fitness is my company and my platform to deliver training-related content to people just like you. The site features in-depth articles, movement breakdowns, and our online training program, The Protocol. And I offer one-on-one remote coaching for fitness athletes. So I hope you check it out. Head over to zorfitness.com. That's ZOAR fitness.com. See you there. Today we got Cameron Currie on the show. He is a CrossFit coach. He's actually a level 2, and he coaches at PR Star Fitness, which is a CrossFit affiliate located in Virginia. He also has his precision nutrition certification, and you can learn more about his nutrition coaching service if you go to Instagram at fuel_movement. And you can find his personal account on Instagram at CamCurrie_ and on Facebook at Cameron Currie. In today's episode, we get into how to maximize your fitness with limited time. So first, we discuss how maximizing your training on limited time actually starts in the little pockets outside of your session. So how things like sleep, nutrition play a role in your overall adaptation. But we also talk about how you can do things like microdose fitness, movement, and mobility to augment the gains that you actually are getting inside the gym. Then we look at the training sessions themselves. How can we improve your training session flow, the layout of your week, your transition points in your workouts? Also, we can increase the amount of productivity that you can actually get in those workouts on limited time. It's a super practical, useful episode, and I think you're going to really enjoy it. So without further ado, let's get into this conversation with Cameron Currie. So Cameron, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. It's an absolute honor to be here. I've listened to a few in the past, and it's really good stuff, man. I'm looking forward to having a conversation with you.
Yeah, me as well, for sure. So it was funny. I was actually doing my homework for this show, getting stuff ready for the show notes. And I saw that on your Facebook that you grew up in Troy, PA.
I did. Yeah, man. I went to high school there. You're not from that area, are you?
No, but I live in Williamsport now.
Oh, that's like right down the road. Absolutely. Yeah. That's such a small world, man. Love that.
Yeah. That's so funny because now it's literally like right down the road and I'm like interviewing, but you're not anywhere around here anymore.
Yeah. I'm in Virginia now. I still make it home, and I'll actually pass through Williamsport when I go visit family and stuff. I'll stop at, I can't remember the name of the CrossFit, 1460 or something like that.
1440?
Yeah, 1440. That's it. Yeah. Great facility up there.
Yeah, I interviewed the head coach, Jeff Baltimore.
I heard that. Yeah, that's a good
right at the beginning of season 2. Yeah, no, they're really good down there. That's actually where I did the quarterfinals at.
Yeah, that's right. I saw your videos. Looks like you had a great quarterfinal too. A lot of support up in that area too.
Yeah, for sure. I really appreciate them inviting me back once in a while.
Let you play a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, you did excellent in quarterfinals too. I mean, what was your placing?
I think like last I looked, I'm leaderboarding like a fiend, right? I think it was like 158th or something like that.
Yeah.
It was like one of those things where you get so close and you taste it and it's like, oh, I can't get in there. No. And it's no worries. It only made me hungrier for next year. Right. Like that's the big thing. I'm really excited to get back to training.
Yeah. I think, there's definitely a lot in just having a goal to chase.
Yeah, absolutely. And
it's almost more about the process of getting there than it is, punching your ticket sometimes.
Yeah. And we've talked about this offline a little bit. Like it's just the format, it's a new way to play. And I think that CrossFit's done a really great job of continually evolving their formatting to keep up with the demands of the population, which is great.
Yeah, agreed. I think they're definitely moving in the right direction, which is, definitely what more than we could say from past seasons. Let's put it that way.
Exactly.
So, you're a pro member for Zor in the site.
Mm-hmm.
I forget, I might have asked you this already before in one of our conversations, but how did you find Zor or me or whatever? I guess we're 2 in 1.
Yeah. It goes back to, this is early days of COVID lockdown. Our gym had shut down And it looked like we were going to be shut down for a few months. So I kind of went through this like renaissance phase where I was just consuming every piece of fitness content I could. I was trying all kinds of different modalities, things like gymnastics bodies, the training plan, training think tank. I mean, I was diving into it head first. And I think I might've searched for like CrossFit programming, and there you were. And I'm like, oh, what is this? Oh, let me dive a little bit deeper. Let me pay for that pro membership. And then I look behind the curtain and there's all this great content that you put out. So yeah, lots of respect for what you do. And it's just really, really well thought out. And I found it through, just quarantine lockdown, man.
That's awesome. I feel like a lot of bored people Google searching found me during lockdown. Hey, that's good. Yeah. I mean, is there any like piece of content in particular that you really liked?
The one thing that I really found beneficial, and this is like, we're going to get really nerdy here, but I've always had this, like, whenever you have a workout, there's a formula that I've always followed for however many number of reps you have. There's like an average seconds per rep thing that I've always had. And it's always been like right around 3.2 seconds. And I can factor out workouts like that. But then you did the cyclical movement speed of different CrossFit open movements. And I thought that was just really genius because you can really lay it out and start to strategize a performance based on, hey, if I move at max effort, this is how long it's going to take me. If I go with a 1 second pause in the top, it's going to take me X amount of seconds. And you can really start to gauge your performances realistically with that kind of formatting.
Yeah. Basically, like, I like to think of it as like, oh, if you have a 12-minute workout, I know that I'm not going to obviously be able to do like a sprint variation. So I'm going to have to figure out some way to make this more sustainable. And that way I know, okay, even with, if I factor out transition time, this is how long the cycle, cycle times are going to take me for this movement. And that kind of figure out my different breakdown splits and stuff, which is just another kind of way to help people pace, I guess.
Well, and cool. When you see people in like yourself in the industry who like are basically, obviously professionals, and they're giving you permission, like, hey, you can rest with a 1 second pause overhead. You don't have to go bananas, balls to the wall, like empty the tank every single workout. Slow down. It's pretty cool.
Well, I've done that enough times where I know I can't do that anymore. I mean, there's people that can, but I can't.
We learn the hard way so others don't have to.
Exactly. Yeah. Experiment myself. Do that all the time. So, yeah, I mean, today we really want to get into, how to maximize your time or your training time with limited availability to train. And that's sort of what we're focusing this entire conversation around. And, for someone who is a non-professional athlete, like you don't get your salary to train, I think you're probably one of the most qualified people to talk about this because obviously, like we just mentioned, you placed really well in the quarterfinals, almost went qualified for semis. Yeah, like right up there, top tier athlete. And yet you have, a job that you go to and do the thing. And I think, so obviously like you're someone who's really qualified to talk about this. But I think one of the things that we had mentioned first was basically that one of the excuses that we hear a lot is that people don't have time, or maybe that they don't have enough time, because a lot of people that are listening to this are already working out. So it's not like they're making the excuse of, oh, I'm not going to train at all. It's more like, well, I can't achieve this goal or this goal because I don't have enough time. So I guess the first place that we can maybe start talking about is like, why do people say that? Like say, oh, I don't have time to be able to do that. What are some of the things that people might say?
Yeah. The thing that pops into my head immediately is this word busy. Like, I'm too busy for this. I don't have, I can't fit it into my schedule. And, honestly, I think the thing that might be the issue there is they're setting their barrier of entry way too high, right? When I say to somebody who's, maybe not working out, hey, you need to start working out, automatically they go to 60 minutes a day, 3 to 5 days a week. Oh, I don't have time for that. Right. Like, yeah, not many people do. I think the important thing is to kind of like evaluate what your actual goals are. Right. And we'll talk about that a little bit too, more, I'm sure. But like, you don't, and agree with me or disagree, Ben, on this, but you can get really, really good fitness with 30 minutes a day, 3 days a week. Factoring in your nutrition and everything else is kind of on point, right? You can get pretty fit with 30 minutes a day for 3 days a week, right?
Totally. Yeah. Like if you had the average person on the street and like you could manipulate the rest of their life to, be pretty aligned with that, and you had 90 minutes a week, you could get quite a bit done. Way more than people realize, I think.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the other thing too. We as CrossFitters kind of live in this bubble where we're measuring ourselves up against these big name competitors who train 90 minutes, 2 hours a day. And we think that that's the way it has to be to get fit and healthy and in shape. And it's not, it really isn't. And I think that's another thing that I learned through quarantine is, I went through this phase a couple weeks to a month or so where I was doing 30 to 45 minute workouts. I felt great. I had so much more time for other things too.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely the downside if you're someone who, wants to call yourself a competitor or you want to compete, especially in CrossFit. Like there's a lot of different things you got to basically put your time into and try to refine a lot without any question. But yeah, for the average person, they can totally get away with just so much less, frankly.
Yeah. And the other thing too, with people who say they are too busy, I always try to change the language, right? If somebody says to me, hey, why didn't you make it to the gym the other day? Like that was your plan. Like, why didn't you make it happen? Oh, I didn't have time. No, let's try to rephrase that. You didn't make it a priority, right? Plain and simple, right? Maybe your day got away from you. I understand that. But when it comes to like your fitness time, there's going to be so much in your life that's trying to encroach on that. You have to protect it like it's an appointment with yourself and lock it down and make sure it happens. Because otherwise, you become a victim to your schedule and your day and all that other stuff that's just piling up around you. You got to push it to the sides.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's true for almost every aspect of your life. Even if you want to be a great dad, for example, or mom, you need to be able to put your phone aside, be able to put your work aside, whatever it is, or maybe even your fitness, so that you can, be fully engaged in that activity. If you have a podcast interview that you're doing, make sure you put your phone on silent, like put it on do not disturb. So you can actually be present. I think that's something that is a skill, regardless if someone's into fitness or not. Like that's something that you can take away. Like even if you're trying to focus on something besides fitness, if you can learn to put all of your focus in one direction at a time, you're going to be way more successful at whatever you choose to do, fitness related or not.
Yeah. It just comes down to intention, just doing whatever you're doing with intention, because otherwise you're just going to move an inch in 14 different directions versus a mile straight ahead. And that's the goal.
Definitely true. Something that I also think is interesting, and there's like all these caveats before we actually get into it. How can you save time when you're working out? Because that's where we're eventually headed. But I think that's sort of what people want right away. And they don't want, put your phone on do not disturb, because that seems like something that's not super sexy, but it's probably the most important thing you can do. Another one of these things I think is figuring out, okay, based on your goals, there's going to be some sort of minimal effective dose for what you're doing. And let's just assume for a second that this person's like a CrossFit competitor. They're trying to place as high as they can, and maybe they, did quarterfinals and they were, barely made the quarterfinals. And now they're trying to, tier up. There's a minimum effective dose as to getting all different skill touches that a person needs to do. And I don't necessarily have a question at the end of this.
Yeah.
But this is just something that you need to be thinking about as a person, is to understand okay, I have weightlifting movements, I have cyclical stuff, I have actual sport like the mixed modal. There's all these different components that I have to work into my training, and to be able to figure out what does my life look like and what did the actual sessions look like, so I can start to optimize this whole process. That's sort of what we're talking about here.
Yeah, I think that's a good kind of segue into training intuition, right? As an athlete, most people just getting into it, they're probably not going to have that awareness. They're going to be kind of distracted by the bright, shiny, sexy workout. Whereas, guys like ourselves here who have been training for a while and have a pretty good awareness of where their inefficiencies lie and what their strengths are, unfortunately, you're going to have to struggle through some workouts because you need to target your weaknesses. And if you only have 45 minutes, you're going to spend a lot of time punishing your weaknesses. But it's also important to kind of balance that out with the occasional workout that you just absolutely crush, and you need that little mental win underneath your belt. But if you're short on time, I think you're going to be better served going against and attacking your weaknesses in a smart manner for sure.
Yeah, I would say that also probably goes for time of year as well. for a lot of people, their season's over at this point when this is going to air. Like all of summer, all of fall, that's still off season for all of those people. And the off season doesn't mean necessarily not training, but it might mean like working on your limiters and your individual weaknesses that you really need to bring up. And that's sort of what you're talking about here. And that could be very easily 6 months plus of your training year kind of blocked out for that if you're someone who's actually a competitor.
Right. Absolutely. I think that's, and it is so important right now in this kind of phase as we're kind of wrapping up the season. I know a lot of people are hungry, right? A lot of people got that competitive drive, but the CrossFit style workouts, the competition style workouts they shouldn't necessarily make up the bulk of your training, right? It should be the skill work, the strength work, giving your joints a break, working some tempo, that sort of thing, will ensure a nice long career doing this stuff and having fun year after year.
I really do think most people, they fall into that. Cause like, for example, if you're doing like a team sport, it's like all the teams that get done. And, if you see the other teams go through playoffs, you're going to be hungry to get back into it, but your team's not meeting. So you're not going to play. Right. So like, you're not going to go out there and start, put on your own pads and go run around the football field by yourself out there as you get into the wintertime, but you have to wait. And then you'll eventually start doing the off season workouts and eventually start to build into the next season. And you have to make that hunger last throughout that entire year because you can't just, see the other team go into playoffs and like want to do it. But I think in our sport, in CrossFit, I think people do that all the time where they're like, oh, well, everybody else moved on that I respect and like when you follow on social media. So I need to keep training really hard versus kind of stepping back and taking a break, getting healthy again, and then starting to build back into working on the limiters and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And that's where motivation and discipline start to deviate, right? You get the motivation, it's super high, but then what happens 6 months later, you got to have that discipline to keep training hard for sure. And that's where that really picks up.
I think coaching is obviously super helpful in that process as well. Like, being able to have someone else to write your program, because if you're writing your own program, it's a much better chance that you're going to be giving yourself what you want or what you think you need at a particular time of year versus what you actually need. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, the motivation versus discipline thing is something that much more of the higher level athletes, I think, understand, because on a regular basis, they don't necessarily feel like going to the gym, right. Which I'm sure people are like kind of confused by that almost who are listening. They just assume that people are super fit, want to go work out all the time. And that's not the way it is a lot of the time. Like, how exactly would you want people to, like, for example, if they're athletes at your gym, how do you want them to think about or possibly being disciplined? Like, how would you want them to be disciplined? In what ways?
Oh, it starts honestly for a lot of the people that come to the gym. Honestly, that part is easy. It's like they're paying a membership. They come in, their class time is set. They're locked in. So there's not much friction there. I think the only friction really is like they open their phone and they see the workout and they're like, nah, I don't really want to do that. If you get that little inkling of like, nah, I don't really want to do that, you probably should go do it. Right. That's the stuff you need to work on. Outside of that, I would try to like look for other areas in their lives where they can have discipline that's going to serve them better when they do go to the gym. Things like, nutrition, sleep quality, sleep hygiene, that sort of thing. Having that discipline in the other 23 hours of the day can go so far to make that 1 hour you get in the gym even more special, I think.
Again, I think most people, like I already mentioned, they want to go straight to the session itself. Like, what things do I need to optimize in my session, in my actual training? Like, what protocol do I need? Like, that's not what it's about here. Like, so much of what people who are, and I don't mean professionals now in the sense that they're getting paid to do it, people who are carrying themselves as professionals, they are disciplined in things outside of their actual training sessions. Mm-hmm. Like the things that you mentioned, like the sleep hygiene, like the nutrition, like the stress management stuff. Staying on top of that is a huge separator and allows you to adapt to the training that you actually do in your sessions so much better as well. It's not just about training hard. It's about like actually adapting to what you're doing.
Yeah. And that's something we can definitely touch on too, is having the discipline within the gym to, stick to your percentages, to foam roll and stretch, that sort of thing, to listen to your body, and really Make sure you're taking the proper rest between sets. I hear people all the time like, oh, 2 minutes was too much rest. I did it every minute on the minute. Like, no, you're missing the whole point. Or like cutting their range of motion short because they want to lift heavier than the person next to them. That's something we see a lot in a group class setting for sure. And while a good competition push is great, if you're going to push yourself to the breaking point, not so good, right?
Totally. And, even I think people who are more disciplined outside of their training sessions tend to be more disciplined in their training sessions, like sticking to those rest times, holding the tempo that they're actually given versus, just trying to load up the bar with as much as they can. And yeah, I think that's maturity from an athlete perspective. So like if you understand that the things I do outside of the gym in my entire life is just as important as my actual training session for my training, like if that's the thing that you care about, you still have to be super disciplined outside of that. And again, I think the people who are more disciplined in the other things are more disciplined when they actually go into the gym. And this is, I kind of want to tie this into what you are calling like microdosing fitness, which again is something that's happening outside of your actual training session. So this could be a way to, even with, little pockets of your day, let's say you are having a time where you can do things that are going to augment and actually improve the adaptation that you're getting or the stimulus that you're getting in the workouts that you're actually doing. So what are some ways that someone could microdose fitness throughout their day outside of like a traditional training session?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because there are these pockets throughout the day. Finding 5 minutes versus finding a 60-minute window sometimes is a lot easier, right? I think the first thing that you start your day with is a 10-minute walk, 5-minute walk, something simple. I think people really underestimate the power of walking because it's not sexy. It's not CrossFit. It's not like hardcore enough. But it doesn't matter. It can do so much to help you clear your head. It does so much good for just circulation and just mindset. It's really great. Honestly, I start my day every day with a walk. From there, it's the thing that you hear about all the time. Like for every hour of work, you need to get up and do 15 minutes of movement. Everybody knows that, but they don't apply it. And that's where, again, that discipline kind of kicks in. But it can be something like set a timer for an hour. And after you finish your deep work for an hour, you get up and you do like 100 jumping jacks. And every 10 reps, maybe you do 3 squats, like something like that. It's so simple and so unglamorous that people shy away from it. But the overall like indicator of good fitness is calorie output. It's not that 1 hour that you spend in the gym if the rest of your day is sedentary. If you find little ways to win back some movement throughout the day, it's going to set you up for success. And it can look like anything. It can be 100 sit-ups. It can be 100 push-ups. With Murph coming up around the corner, like you need to work on your push-ups. Everybody, make them perfect. Those kinds of things, just sneak them in. I like to basically do a quick little elevated child's pose when my coffee's brewing. It doesn't have to be much. Just something is better than nothing.
It's funny that you mentioned the timer thing. I do that several times a week, at least throughout my workday. I'll say like, okay, every time I get done with someone's design where it's like a natural break, I'll do like 5 minutes of mobility, or like, okay, maybe I'll do like it every hour on the hour. I'll go row 1K or something. Ooh, and it's nice. It's like a little break from like the cognitive stress. And it's something where I can very easily just go do that. And I come right back. And over the course of my day, it actually doesn't lose me any time because I would take some sort of a break anyway, because you can't just plug through the entire day. And that way it keeps me cognitively alert and kind of in the zone too, because it's circulation, like you said. It's just super interesting that you mentioned that. It's like one of the things that I do all the time.
Oh, I wish more people did it. And that's like, so I'm actually like, you got me inspired now. I didn't even think to like get up and just go row a 1K. Mine is just a couple quick jumping jacks, high knee. Yeah. All that. So I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if people are in an office somewhere, they're probably like, oh, I can't do that. Like I don't want to have like my rower in my office, but even if you feel like your boss is watching you out of the corner of his eye the entire time, if you drink enough water where you got to go to the bathroom every 45 minutes, go to the bathroom on a different story of the building or something, like walk around, make sure you get there, go talk to somebody instead of sending them an email. little things like if you want to do it, you'll find a way to do it. It's just a matter of like thinking about your day in a slightly different lenses. How can I get these little pockets of time rather than I need a 90-minute session to get all of my fitness in.
Right. And honestly, like you set a timer too. Like people need that trigger and that behavior. Like just hearing that, like, oh man, my alarm's going off. I got to go do this quick lap around the building, whatever it is. Right. I think having that trigger, but then also having a reward that's a little more than just the actual, like, I did it. Yay. Like, okay, cool.
Right.
What does that really mean? Maybe it's like you go and you get like your special seltzer water that you love. I don't know. It's something that's it's a reward for you. That way you're kind of encouraged to do it. You get the trigger, you get the action, and you get the reward. It's all bundled in nice and neat.
Right. Oftentimes I will wake up and do the mobility thing first thing in the morning as well. And a simple cue for a lot of people could be like their coffee, right? Yeah. Like you start your coffee brew. It takes 5 minutes. Oftentimes it even has an alarm, like mine beeps when it's done. It'll give me like 5 loud beeps. That's like the perfect cue. It's like literally a sound that's saying like, oh yay, my coffee's ready. Like, good job. Like that's basically what it's saying. And it's like, yeah, exactly. It's like, oh man, it's like The Office where, Jim like reinforces Dwight and, gives him the Altoids every time. It's like exactly like that. You're an animal. You need to understand that you are.
That's how it works.
Yeah. If you reward yourself, it will work. It's funny.
That's great. I was going to make an office reference, but I'm like, I don't know. Cause some of them get pretty deep. Are you a big Office fan?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah. I watch it a lot. Oh man, that's like definitely one of my things. I watch it all the time. Walking in the morning is another thing you mentioned. I don't want to skip over this too quickly because I think this is something that is incredibly valuable. All these little habits, but walking in the morning, yes, it's actual movement. I just listened to one of the lectures by Stuart McGill, which is like, he's like a spine specialist. And basically he said, like, if you don't walk, you can't have a healthy back. So if you're someone who is sitting a lot, like that's without a doubt, one of the best things you can do is just walk. Like, don't even run, just walk. Like you will, like you get the aerobic base, you get, your actual hips moving through the range of motion. Like you get the blood flow. Hopefully if you're walking outside, you get some sunlight in the morning, which helps, set your circadian rhythm earlier in the morning. You're going to feel more alert. You're going to get to sleep better later at night. Like there's multiple layers to all this stuff.
Yeah. And for the people who really like get into tracking their steps too, I've worked with people who get stressed out when they don't hit 10,000 steps. Think about how easy it'd be if you front load your day with a 10, 15, 20-minute walk. That's like at least 3,000 steps. You're front loaded. You're good. You shouldn't have to stress about it too much. So it just takes one thing. It's one thing less to worry about, hopefully. Yeah, I get a lot of people with that 10,000 number being like the milestone a lot. Have you experienced that with any of your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for example, I had a Fitbit that I wore for a while. I don't wear it most of the time now, but it would be the same thing. Like, it's really easy. It's like it'll beep when you get the 10,000 steps. It's like that little cue again.
Yeah.
So it's for a lot of people, that's something where, I took it off because it's like every time you get a text, it dings and it goes off and you're looking at it all the time and that sort of thing, which is not super helpful. Yeah. But I think a lot of people, that is something, it can be useful too. It's not always bad. Like if you can use it to help, maybe, I don't want to say motivate you, but help encourage you to try to get as many steps as you can. Like that's certainly a good thing.
Yeah.
You just have to know if it's a positive versus like, adding value versus subtracting value. And I think, another thing that I really like that you mentioned was like the front loading a lot of the work in your day. And it's like, if you can, think of it as like building momentum. Like if you can get yourself moving in the right direction, it's so much easier to continue that. And this is the case for nutrition as well, which I'm sure because you do some nutrition coaching as well. Do you see like if people, for example, they go to like a party and they have like a cookie because it's sitting on the thing and they're like, oh, I had the cookie. You know what? I'm going to have 6 more cookies because my macros are already off.
Oh, yeah. Dude, they cut all 4 tires because one is flat. Like, no, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm taking
that's a great way to put it. When you say it like that, you're like, oh, of course I'm an idiot.
Yeah,
but like people do that all the time.
Yeah, I always tell people, like, I get people that will that I'm working with that text me, hey, I have my daughter's birthday party tonight. There's going to be cake, ice cream, cookies. I'm freaking out. Help me. All right, take a deep breath. And I always tell them, like, hey, front load your day. Get a big, like 30 to 40 grams of protein for breakfast. That'll keep you feeling full. Keep it low fat, low carb, because you know that's what's going to be at this party, all fats and carbs.
Right.
Try to slam some protein. And then honestly, eat the damn cookie, right? Like, memories over macros is something that I tell a lot of my clients as well. I picked that up a long time ago, and making those memories is so important, because if you spend the entire time stressing because you're not allowing yourself, restriction never works, right? If the diet that doesn't bend will eventually break. And that's something that really leads to that unfortunate rebound effect. When somebody ends a nutrition program, it's like they go off the rails. But I try to teach more sustainability. But that's, it's something that's really, really important, is front loading your day with protein. If you have those kind of days.
And people always say, like, win the day, like win your morning, win the day, which I still do think it's a little corny, but I think it's also true.
Yeah.
Right? I think there's an element of truth in that.
Well, and I think it is corny in the fact that, like, you get all these, gurus pushing,
right,
hey, this is your morning routine. And then you just try to do it all. And it ends up taking, oh my gosh, my morning routine is 2 hours long.
Yes.
I'm not going to get anything done.
My morning routine takes me to lunch, and then I don't get any more work done that I need to get done.
Exactly. Right.
But I've had my perfect cup of coffee and my, mobility routine and all that stuff.
Journal for 30 minutes, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. But I think, like, those are some things to think about. But like you said, I think practical is always best. And that's what you're kind of getting out with the nutrition. Like, same thing with, like, any sort of habit that you put in place. Make it so small that it's almost ridiculous that you couldn't sustain it. Like, I'm going to do something while my coffee pot is brewing, because I literally just stand there and, like, drool over it until it's ready. Like, that's, like, the simplest thing you could do. Like, there's no reason that like, you wouldn't be able to sustain that on any given day, no matter what's going on. So I think that's another thing. If you set yourself up for, like you said, kind of microdosing that fitness, it's something that you're much more likely to keep in and built into your day versus if it's something grandiose.
Yeah, no, I think that's such a good point. I think that goes with any kind of change you're trying to implement into your life, Ben, is you got to make sure you have the space for it. I think too many people try to pick up a new habit because they saw it and they're like, oh, I want to do that. 30 minutes a day of journaling sounds awesome. But if your morning is just absolute chaos, you're chasing kids, you're trying to slam a protein shake, it's just not going to work, right? Maybe it's 3 sentences in the morning. Don't make it this big thing. Just small little actions go a really long way.
And that's sort of what the whole fitness thing's all about. Like, you're not going to push crazy amounts of progress in one training cycle. Like, it won't ever happen. It's like an accumulation over years of just slowly moving in the right direction. And sometimes it's going to look like really hard work and, like, maximal effort. And other times it's going to be like, I want to rest it, or I don't want to rest this week, but I got done with my season. I need to rest. So I'm going to take the week or 2 weeks, even though I don't feel like taking off, and, like, make myself do that. And then, again, that's the discipline,
right?
Like, that's where you need to be disciplined with what you're doing. Yeah. Let's start talking a little bit more about training sessions itself. I think there's ways where people can get more efficient with their time, even if they, like, this is the whole idea here. Like, what can you do to be more efficient with your time that you already have? If you can't carve more time out of your day for training, what can you do? I think one of the things that we can start to talk about is, like, morning sessions. Like, say this is something where you normally work out after your work day. What could you do in the morning without having to get up crazy early to be able to do it? Like, what do you have access to maybe at home, or what things can you do with minimal warm up? Like, how would you help someone think about things that they could do in the morning?
Yeah, I like that. You wake up and you said minimal equipment. I mean, you're looking at the equipment right here, body weight. There's so much that you can do outside of, I know we mentioned, push-ups, sit-ups, squats, but there's static holds, there's planks, there's plank shoulder taps, there's bird dogs, there's Stuart McGill's spine health stuff. What's the big 3, right?
Big 3.
Yeah, the big 3. You can do stuff like that. hollow body holds, Superman holds. If you have some equipment, easy cardio sessions that you just can basically roll out of bed, put your workout gear on and just go. It doesn't have to be the kind of session that leaves you on your butt when you're done. It can be 30 minutes, 45 minutes of nice, easy work. What about you? What would some of your stuff look like that you would recommend for people?
Exactly what you said. I really like the idea where it's not something that has to be super stressful. Like, it doesn't have to be maximal effort is what I mean by that. Especially if you're someone who doesn't really love getting out of bed and training in the mornings. Like, if you're someone who normally trains in the PM and you're trying to start working out at least something in the AM, starting off with something that's a little bit more fun and easy, or even if it's just easy, you're more likely to start it, right? Like, if you're going to do a 5K time trial on the rower because you got a rower in your basement, that's a lot harder to get out of bed and like literally make yourself sit, like put your butt on the seat and start that process. You'll have much more resistance to try to get to that point than if it's like, I'm just going to row for 20 minutes at a super low heart rate zone.
Yeah.
So I think making it accessible, whether it's body weight, whether it's going out for like a jog in the morning, whether it's walking your dog, something super accessible that you're like, oh yeah, I can do that. And that'll be something that I know I'm going to be able to do that 3 times a week if I'm on my worst week.
Yeah, that's the thing. You nailed it right there. Something you can do on your worst day, right? You kind of mentioned the 5K. I think about all the things that I would have to do if I were going to do a 5K in the morning. I got to first drink my coffee. I got to get myself hype. I got to find the right playlist. I got to make sure that I'm not going to be distracted. Like, there's automatically like 5 other things I have to do other than the 5K row. So that comes at a pretty significant cost versus, like you said, just hopping on and just going for 20, 30 minutes. That's it. That's all it has to be.
And that way you could listen to a podcast. You could just jam out to some music. Like, you can be in a different mind state there as well versus having to get geared up to really hammer a hard workout. Like, even if you're doing like a rough EMOM of air squats and burpees and push-ups of some kind, like, again, like, that's just something where it's going to be more difficult for you to actually start the process of doing it. And you're much more likely to stop doing it as a result.
Yeah. And think about too, your warm up has to be different, right? For a 5K row, you got to spend so much time getting prepped to get to that zone to be ready for it, that it adds maybe 15 minutes easily to your workout.
Yeah, easily. And also, like, on the back end too, like if you're well, you're obviously going to feel like garbage if you do like a maximal effort row like that. But even if it's something that's like a super hard EMOM, you're not going to just, okay, now I'm going to go walking over and take a shower. Like, you're going to be like rolling on the ground for a couple minutes. Then you'll start to maybe move around. You'll have to do some active mobility work or like some static stretching stuff. And then eventually you'll stop sweating enough where you can get in the shower. And then you'll still probably be foggy for a while after that.
Oh yeah.
Which is, I think there's so many advantages to just doing something that's a little bit easier if you're low on time.
Yeah. And then you get into the world of like training fasted. I would recommend people eat something before they do like a big 5K test or a super hard EMOM. But then you got to factor in like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I got to make my breakfast and have it just gets way too complicated. And the more complicated something is, the less likely you are to do it.
Right. Typically for stuff that I write for people in the mornings, it's usually, what do you got at home? Like, where you can just roll out and start right away. No need to really warm up or do anything. And yeah.
I have a question for you. Have you ever asked the question for your people too? Like, hey, what do you want to do in the morning? Like, what
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Totally.
What's your answer for that for people?
It depends. Like, some people are like, I want to lift in the morning. I would say more people, and maybe I just think this because I'm this way as well. I'd rather wake up and do some easy cardio, just because, like, the first thing that I roll out of bed, like, my arousal is pretty low. Like, I'm pretty chill in the morning. So it's like, I take a little bit to get going, and I don't feel like going and trying to get under a heavy barbell.
Nope. Yeah.
Like, I don't feel like doing snatches and cleans. Like, that just sounds like it would hurt in the morning.
Yeah, it sounds awful.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then not everybody's like that. Like, there's some people who are like, yeah, by the time I get to the afternoon, like, I feel pretty zapped and like I feel much better, more alert in the morning. And like, hey, if that's you, go for it. Like, I know I am not coded that way. Like,
right.
I am sluggish in the mornings. It takes me a while to get going. So I roll out of bed and jump on the rower or jump on the air bike or something helps me a lot. So
yeah.
That's just my personal orientation, but no, it's going to work for you. If you're someone who wants to wake up and go to the gym and do a lift, then do it. And then figure out, you could flip flop this protocol where it'd be like, you do a walk with your dog when it's still light out before you eat dinner or something, or you spend time playing with your kids in the backyard, and that's like your movement work.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's ways that you can probably be creative about it elsewhere.
Definitely.
So getting into the actual, like the main session of the day itself here, what do you think someone could do? Let's talk about like training hygiene. So like things that they could, hygiene meaning like clean up, like around surrounding that training session, to make the actual training itself, like whether it's the entry point to that session, whether it's like the exit to that session, or actual during, like in between transition points, that they could, what things can someone do to like maximize that time?
Yeah. 3 things immediately come to mind. The first, and I'm looking at this as like the low hanging fruit, is leave your phone out off the training floor. Unless you're working with a coach that needs video evidence and like to review, you don't need to record every single lift, and you don't need to answer text in between your set, because every time you do that, you're taking your focus from your training to whatever conversation you're having. I can't tell you how many times I've unfortunately done this, is had my phone off to the side, forgot to put it on do not disturb, and I'll get a work text and I'm like, oh, I got to answer this really quick. And I'm out. My mind is kind of checked out at that point. So phone away for one. I would honestly say like doing more mobility outside of the gym will shorten your warm-up time as well over long enough time. And I think you did something on this, Ben, 30 days of mobility. And you mentioned that your warm-up time was cut in half or something ridiculous like that. Yeah.
So like my biggest weakness is just my strength. So I'm like always working on like my weightlifting. So my snatch and clean and jerk, my mobility isn't great. So it takes me, I warm up, and especially if it's wintertime and my garage is cold, I have to warm up, like literally get my temperature up. And then it's doing all the mobility work, which can take me much longer depending on how I feel. Like sometimes that's like a half-hour process easily. And then I finally actually get into my working sets, and that process can take a really long time. So like we were mentioning, if you can get some of that mobility work and kind of space it into those pockets throughout your day, even if it's something super simple, like you hit a stretch, while like you said, when you're brewing your coffee or something, like all of that stuff will cut your training time out.
Yeah.
So 100%, like you can make your warm-ups really long and like, relatively unproductive, or you can, cut that time down a lot by being really strategic in how you space out things throughout your day.
Yeah, definitely. And like target that mobility and hit it that way. When you are in the gym, you're not spending 45 minutes doing these crazy band foam roller drills and stuff. And I'm not saying they don't have a place. They absolutely do. They can be super beneficial if you have the time. If you're telling me you don't have time to train, and I see you got 16 bands up and you're holding these crazy poses, what's the intent behind it? I think the final thing would be, I think we look at training as like block piece 1, 2, 3, but you can start to kind of seamlessly blend those two. For example, like just kind of off the top of my head, every 2 minutes for 10, 5 back squats. But let's say your next piece has like pull-ups in it. So after you finish your back squats, I'll go over and I'll do a couple kip swings. And then the next set, I'll do maybe 3 strict pull-ups. And you're slowly progressing to your pull-up. That way, when you finish your squats, all you have to do is clean your weights, and you're ready for pull-ups, and you're good to go. Rather than spending an additional 5, 10, 15 minutes warming them up.
Yeah. I think a lot of people lose time in the transitions, like you just mentioned. Like I did my strength piece. Now I'm doing all my movement prep that I need to do for my Metcon, and I got to get all my gear out and all that stuff. Like, how hard is it to be able to get all the gear onto you that you need for your Metcon between you're like during your rest of your strength sets? Like little things like that will save you so much time. And oftentimes too, people just don't know what they're doing next, or I got to look at my phone again to figure out what I'm doing.
Oh yeah. That's the other thing. Like, it drives me bonkers sometimes. I get the same way though. I get it. Sometimes I space out. Like, what was that again? Oh, it's wall balls. Okay.
You're like, oh, I forgot the sequence of this AMRAP again. Oh, was it again 16 reps or 18 reps on this? Yeah. I mean, that's something people can do. If like you're someone, I think everyone's kind of, especially if you're doing a lot of training, like if you have one piece in the day, it's pretty easy to memorize a 10-minute AMRAP of a triplet. Like, right. But if you have 3 or 4 different pieces, you got warm up, strength, you got your accessory work at the end, and then you're trying to remember what was in your Metcon. That's way harder. So if you can even write it down like a little whiteboard, again, that's just another way to kind of set your phone aside. I think doing something like that where it's literally written in front of you where you can reference it without having to be distracted is super valuable as well.
Yeah, that's and it goes back to like the triggers too, because maybe you're oh, I'm going to leave my phone. I won't do anything. I won't touch it. But every time you pick it up, there might be a notification that kind of triggers you a little bit, right? And pulls you away from it. Yeah, that's a really good point. Just make sure you're wise with your transitions, and I would honestly like time cap your warmups, if that makes sense. I think I mentioned it to you, like a warm up for an hour session shouldn't be more than like a quarter of your total training session. Would you agree with that? Like 15 minutes for a 60-minute session?
Yeah. And I think too, certainly warm-up should have caps, especially if you're someone who knows that your warm-ups do bleed into your session and then you run out of time at the end. You're like, oh, I got to skip this important piece because I took too long to warm up and I knew I didn't have enough time. Like you got to know, okay, by this point, like I'm going to set my 15-minute timer. And when that time's up, because I got 75 minutes to train, I'm a competitor, I got all these different things I got to hit. I can't take more than 15 minutes before I get into my first set of clean jerks. Like you need to know that ahead of time going into it. And yeah, I think like seeing the entire session build out, okay, I'm not going to take more than maybe a quarter of it to get warmed up. I think that's workout dependent,
right?
But I also think that's probably a general good rule of thumb for people listening as well.
Yeah. And I know we're going to touch on like what happens when you have higher skill, higher technique movements that are in your session. How does that change the flow of it and stuff? But yeah, we'll talk about that for sure.
We can talk about that now. I mean, I think you could even flip things around where I think oftentimes people are like, well, I have to do my skill work first or my strength work first. But if you do something that's not super challenging, that would be aerobic work. You could put that at the beginning of your session too, as like a warm up, where you could use it as a primer if you have like lower skill movements. And that could be just a good example as a warm up too. Like I'm going to do a 12-minute EMOM and I'm going to make sure I have all the patterns that I need for my entire session built into this. So like you said, you got those chest to bars after you do your back squats. I'm going to hit beat kips and ring rows and some other movements and maybe a hinge and a squat pattern so that I can go from clean and jerk into my chest to bars later on. And I've warmed up for all of it at the beginning of my session.
Yeah, I like that. I like that strategy too.
If someone is, again, let's just stick with this idea of someone who is either doing CrossFit or they want to be competitive or they're trying to get as a high level as they can with the time that they got. They still have to be able to get strength and skill and all these different components in. Is there a way that they could potentially lay that out throughout, a week or individual sessions that would make things a little bit smoother and cut down on their total warm-up time?
Yeah, you're referring to like the typical flow of a structured plan is like, obviously your warm up and then the higher skill stuff in the front, you're saying, like, and then kind of progress through. Yeah. You always want to start with like the most intense and demanding central nervous system pieces. I'm leaning toward that. Like, hey, if you should always start with a snatch, right? You shouldn't snatch at the end of your workout. It kind of progresses. So by the time you finish your snatches, your legs are warm, you're ready for your heavy back squats. Those back squats will kind of overload you a little bit for the wall balls that are coming up in your conditioning piece. That kind of flow that's the, yeah, I like that.
Totally. And what you're saying there is like, okay, a snatch is a very complex movement. There's a lot of coordination that's involved in that, more so than a back squat. And there's more coordination and strength and neural requirement that's required for a back squat than there is for a wall ball. So like there's this natural peak and then sort of, a tail to that movement where again, like your session, you'll get ramped up really quickly and then you'll hit the most important pieces. And then some of the stuff that's more of an endurance based activity is typically going to be pushed towards the end. That's a pretty good recommendation for most people listening of how to flow through a workout.
And I've actually this is another great tip I picked up along the way is I think I got it from like, I don't know if you know, Rudy Nielsen from Outlaw Way. You remember him from way back in the day?
I don't.
Oh man.
No.
I remember he did a video that was like, if you want to warm up, the best warm up is a snatch warm up because it has everything. It has central nervous system prep. It has squat, hinge, pull. It's got speed. It's got explosiveness. I'll warm up for my snatch, even on days where I'm not snatching sometimes, just because it is such a good warm up.
Yeah. Super interesting. And with something like that, like oftentimes people, if you have a higher skill movement, like a snatch or a clean jerk, And often those are weaknesses for a lot of people listening, especially if you don't have a ton of time to train. If you do like some sort of snatch or clean and jerk, even if it's just like a barbell warm up almost every day, even if you don't lift heavy in a snatch or a clean and jerk every day, like if you warm up for snatch, you're going to be prepared to do deadlifts. Mm-hmm. Like if you warm up for a clean and jerk, you're going to be ready to squat, because like that's like inherently part of the movement. But then you also get the component of like, that's the skill based part of the actual snatch and clean jerk motor pattern.
Yeah.
But then you're primed and ready to go for your actual strength work. So I really like that idea of hitting the Olympic list on a much more frequent basis, even if you're not necessarily doing that in your actual workout.
Exactly. Because I've seen so many of the clients that walk through the door of our gym, like strength gets them to like a certain level, and then technique is just a limiting factor. So yeah, more and more touches on that barbell is going to increase confidence and make them more skillful in that movement, because it is a super high skill movement for sure.
And especially if someone has positional limitations where a snatch isn't a comfortable position to be in, if you get into it every single day, it will get more comfortable. Oh, like your positions will improve quicker than if you do that banded foam rolling distraction thing that you were talking about before. Like, we're not saying that there's not a place for it, but if you're someone who's really low on time, there might not be a place for it.
Right. Would you say that those would fall into obviously the active recovery day? Save that stuff for a little more like movement specific skill sessions or active recovery days, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think for a lot of people, that's just like it's hitting one specific thing. Mm. And then like, how well does that actually transfer to something else? Like, even if you're doing an air bike session, for example, that's going to improve your rowing. That's going to improve like your Metcon. Like there's many things that's touching that could potentially carry over to. If you're back squatting, you can improve your, overhead squats. You can improve your squat cleans. You can improve your wall balls, like all those different patterns. It's like if you're doing a banded pec stretch, if you're just doing it because, well, it's something to do and I need to stretch something, that's a terrible reason to do it. If you're like, no, this pec gets aggravated if I don't do something to make sure I try to release it before I get into my warm up. And that's like that one thing that I do. And then I go through like my more general warm up and movement prep right away. And it's just like that one targeted thing. And it's a reason behind it. Then I think go for it, because it's something that makes sense for you.
Yeah, I like that. I think it does come down to a deeper question of if there's something that basically evaluate your training, right? If you have to ask yourself, why am I doing this? And if you can't have an answer for it, maybe it's time you look elsewhere, right? But I like the pec because I get tight pecs all the time. I do that banded pec stretch and I love it, but some people don't need it. Like hyper flexible, hyper mobile people. Why are you doing that? Why? What's the goal behind it?
Yeah, I guess that is what it comes down to, is like, should it have a place in your training? Mm-hmm. Like, do you need to be doing it? If there's some particular stretch that you feel really good, to do X movement after I do that stretch, then by all means, make sure you hit it. And if it's not improving where you're getting a long-term change from that over time, then you might need to address something else that's going on either in your movement or just like throughout your day where your positions are garbage at your desk at work or something.
Yeah. And it's funny, we talk about habits early on. I think people just fall into the habit. Like you said, I just do it because I have to stretch something, right? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. I think it's true though. People are like, oh, I should do something for my warm up. So I guess I'll do this stretching thing because that's what we do in class.
I've had so many drop-ins like come into the gym and I've done it myself. Like you kind of go into a gym and it's like new, you're dropping in, you don't know anybody. The default with like 98% of drop-ins is a Spider-Man lunge with the rotation. And that's what they do. They're like, I'm going to do this because I feel like I have to stretch something.
Oh, that's so good. They're like, oh, they're watching me. I better do something over here.
Like an athlete, got to do it.
Or pick up the PVC and start doing dislocates.
That's it. Yep.
Oh my gosh. It's all the time. I can't say that because I would totally do that. If I was walking in the gym, I would pick up that thing and start doing PVC dislocates. Like every single time I dropped in. Yeah, oh man, I don't know why this isn't even in a good flow for the conversation, but I actually thought reminded me of, I used to do what I would call open movement warm-ups a lot. This was like February, January, like beginning of the year going into the open. And I would just literally get like an 8-pound wall ball. I'd grab the rower. Like I would always try to have some sort of cyclical, single unders, something really easy. And I would just start going through like a really easy circuit. And it's just a way to hit some of those positions where it's very light loading, but then you also get some of the specificity that you would need in a sport environment, something like an open test, but it's at a much lower level and you start moving. And I think there's so much value in just getting yourself moving at the beginning of your sessions.
Yeah, it's similar to what you said with the snatch too. The more you spend time in those positions, the more comfortable they're going to be. And that's so important leading up to the open. I remember like Comp Train did a video on Sarah Sigmund's daughter and her like 21-minute EMOM warm-up that had a 200-meter run, all this crazy stuff. And people were like, wow, that's the warm-up. Like, yeah, that's the warm-up. She's moving. It's 21 minutes. Like she's hitting all of her positions. It's tough. Don't get me wrong. It's not for everybody. But there's something to be said about touching those movements more and more frequency, especially leading up to an open or competition or event.
Yeah. And again, that's through the lens of someone who's trying to improve those specific things. I mean, if you're someone who's just like trying to generally be fit, you're one of us, you can really start to play with it. It's just like whatever gets you feeling good to go for your next piece that doesn't take all day is really where the bang for the buck is. Yeah. I mean, is there, for example, if we have someone who, let's say you literally have 30 minutes to work out a day, and that's all you get. Like you got 30 minutes from the time you walk into the gym to the time that you got to leave again. And you still want to like work on your strength. You still want to work on your conditioning. Is this now at the point where you would say, okay, I want you to try to touch on all these qualities every day? Or are you going to start to space that out throughout the week? Like, okay, on this particular day, we're going to focus on this quality. On this particular day, we're going to focus on something else.
Yeah, it depends. Like 3 days a week, let's say. Let's just use that as the standard.
Yeah, sure. Let's go with that.
I would do like a pure strength and a pure conditioning, and then a mix of the two to get a little dip into both worlds there. Using the format we kind of talked about earlier, a quarter of the session being the warm up. So there's 7.5 minutes gone off the table, right? You got to warm up. Then I would say like a 10-minute, I love that 10-minute range, every 2 minutes for 10 minutes, maybe like 12 to 15 double dumbbell front squats. Super simple. You don't have to like warm up your overhead squat or anything like that. So now we're looking at like 17 minutes, a quick transition. We're at 20. We've got time for a 10-minute Metcon. Maybe it's, 10-minute AMRAP, 21-15-9, row for calories, wall balls, 9 strict pull-ups, right? Something simple, effective, and then you're out. That's it. That's all it has to be, really. Conditioning piece, maybe it gets a little more intense, right? If that was a little bit of a hybrid of the two. Pure conditioning piece, maybe we are talking about that 5K row test with a 10-minute warm up in the front and time to like lay down on the floor afterwards. And then using that as like a stepping stone for future programming. And then a strength one, I love the bodybuilding split. People get so much reward from just getting the pump, right? Everybody wants it. Everybody needs it. Strength is so important to have. So it'd be, upper body, like a good upper body split, curls, presses, bent over rows, strict presses, that sort of thing. It'd be super simple. 30 minutes a day. You don't have time for anything super complex. You're not going to be doing muscle ups and squat snatches more than likely, unless you're already a pretty high level athlete. I think that's best to be kept in like an hour long session or an hour plus.
Yeah. And if you are someone who works out 3 times 30 minutes a day, you just need to be realistic about, okay, what can I actually achieve in this session? And what can I actually achieve with my overall fitness? If it's, what is that, like 0.5% of like your day right there? It's like very little. Or no, I think an hour is 4%. So it'd be 2% of your day. Very little of an overall picture of what's going on. So you have to expect that the outcome of that, I can get certainly some really good progress, but I also have to be realistic with myself as to actually what I'm going to get out of it. But then also what can I actually get done in those sessions? Because I think I've definitely felt prey of this. And I'm guessing you have too, where it's like, I got A, B, C, D, E that I got to get through today. Mm-hmm. And I know that realistically, I'm going to have time for 3 out of those. And instead, I try to squeeze everything into one session.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there's probably a lot of value in pulling something out and realizing, okay, I can hit, like you said, like these 2 pieces. That's what I'm going to hit today. Or I might get 1 conditioning piece in if it's a 30-minute workout.
Yeah. One of my favorite things to do sometimes when work is really crazy and I'm like, all right, I got so much to do. My head's all over the place. I'll set a timer for an hour and I'll take my normal session and I'll be like, all right, it's a race against the clock. How much can I get done in an hour? And it'll be a sprint. By the end, I'm gassed. I maybe missed 1 or 2 pieces. I'm cool with that because I did everything I could with the resources I had, period. And you got to be okay with that sometimes.
Even if you're someone who is really short on time, if you're working with a coach, they can write it out where it's like, hey, you need to get to this piece by, like, say you have an hour every day to train. It's like, okay, by 10 minutes on the clock, you have to start this point. At 20 minutes, you need to start at this point. At by 43 minutes, you need to start this. And at 55 minutes, you got your 5 minutes of cool down and you're out the door. Like, if you're someone who can get more of an individualized bias of things, it's sort of like almost like they would do it in a class. Like, obviously, like a class is a really easy example because it's like, for most classes, it's 60 minutes. You've got the lesson plan written out. You know that at minute 13 is when you need to start your movement prep by, because otherwise you're not going to get ready to start your Metcon at 35 minutes. And if you don't start at 35 minutes, class is going to run over and the 5 o'clockers are going to be mad at you.
Exactly.
You have everything figured out. And I think that's part of it too, is like, you just need to do your homework before you actually get into the session to figure out, okay, at what point in this workout do I need to be hitting this particular element of it by?
Yeah. Building those timestamps in is so important. Yeah, that's, one thing we've done at the gym recently is for the past few Tuesdays, we do this thing called power hour. And from minute 0 to minute 55, everything's laid out and they don't have a choice. They better be done by X time because we're all moving on. We try to build in some rest and stuff in there too. And it's fun. It keeps people engaged. And I think for an individual working with a coach, like that sort of thing can do the same thing. Keep you engaged, keep you honest, keep you on track for time. That way, like, oh, I just ran out of time. It doesn't become an excuse anymore. It's not even an option. Yeah, I love that.
Even if you use some sort of an interval where it's, for example, you can do intervals where it's like, 8 rounds, rest 2 minutes between, and the work, you're like, well, I think it might take me this long, but you really don't know, versus every 3 minutes times 8 sets, that's exactly how long that's going to take you. I'm going to be done before the 24-minute mark, technically.
Right.
Like, exactly how long that's going to take, so you can kind of figure it out. Like, you have to be obviously smart about this, because if you're really pushing strength metrics, like, okay, if I'm doing a back squat every 90 seconds, you better not be doing more than like doubles or triples at a moderate percentage, because you're going to be really trashed otherwise.
Absolutely.
But you can start to think in that way of like, okay, if I do EMOMs or this sort of interval work where it's every so often, I know how long that's going to take me. So I can start to build this blocks of time into my workout, so I know what's going on here.
Yeah. And I think for the time crunched person, the more variables you can make fixed and permanent, the better off you're going to be. So and I think it comes down to creativity too. Take a workout that's written one way and then say, how can I make this structured into a time block where I know this might've taken me, 15 minutes. How can I make it 10, right? And structure it that way where I get the same amount of work in and it feels roughly the same, but I got stuff to do, right? Like I got to get out of here.
Yeah. I think last thing here is that, like, if you think that you're going to be able to chip away all the time, like all of your breaks and transition times and all that stuff out of your workout, and maintain 100% quality in every single thing that you do, I think you're also probably being a little bit naive.
Yeah.
Like, there is some sort of limitation. Like, the threshold's way higher than people realize. But at the same time, you have to understand that, like, yeah, if you're going straight from your back squats directly into your Metcon with like 2 minutes of rest, okay, your Metcon might be like 80 or 90% of what it could have been. But hey, that's still pretty good.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And honestly, most people should be working at 80 to 90% effort instead of like we talked about earlier, just bashing their head into a wall. Like, let me hold on to this 100% pace as long as possible. I think inherently that kind of adds a brake system. Like, no, you can't function at 100% effort. So we're kind of throttling you back a little bit.
Yeah. If you know you have to start your Metcon at 20 minutes and your back squats go to 18, yeah, you probably are going to hold back a little bit, just because, like, yeah, you're going to know that I can't go there for right now. No, I think that's very true. Any other tips or tricks that you got for people working on short time and workout?
Yeah, the final thing would be, hopefully that you've implemented those other habits, the movement throughout the day, the stretching, putting your phone away. That way, if you do miss a piece or a section here and there, the damage, quote unquote damage, is mitigated by all the other good stuff that you're doing. Just be kind to yourself too. I think a lot of people use training, not so much in the sport of fitness, like the high level athletes, that's something they love and they get paid for. But for most of us, a lot of people can view exercise as like punishment. Like, I was bad over the weekend, I got to go into the gym and work out. Come from a place of compassion and just move and understand that like something is always better than nothing, and just make small steps forward every single day.
Really good stuff. Let's leave it there.
All right.
So, hey, Cameron, thanks for jumping on today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me, dude. I had so much fun. I really appreciate it.
Hey, it's Ben again, and I wanted to take a minute to talk about our online training program, The Protocol. The Protocol is for athletes who want to train for the sport of fitness. It's programmed by me, and it's my best attempt at preparing athletes with varying strengths and weaknesses for the demands of the sport. And I do this through the use of silos, which basically means I segment parts of the program based upon athletes' ability in a particular area. So for example, an element of the program this fall on Tuesdays and Thursdays was gymnastics-focused training. And there are 4 different silos, so athletes could choose to work on chest bars or muscle-ups or handstand push-ups or handstand walks. In other words, we are all doing the same core program, but there are ways to individualize it on a weekly basis. And as part of the program, I also include coaches' notes, technique videos, and educational resources almost daily. My goal is to not just have this feel like you're doing a workout plan, but to feel like I'm actually coaching you through the process of becoming the best athlete you can be. And having access to the protocol is just part of the benefit of being a pro member. You also get instant access to the Vault, which is exactly like it sounds. It means that you unlock the ability to be able to download all the programs that I've ever written. So this includes things like Bulletproof Body, which is the accessory work for functional fitness, gymnastics density for the Big 5, functional thickness, your first muscle up, cyclical supremacy, overhead squat mobility, breathwork for the sport of fitness, and it could go on and on. And lastly, you get instant access to pro articles, which are on topics that I really want to safeguard from the public and keep for my athletes. Stuff like cycle speeds for CrossFit open movements, strength ratio data analysis, so basically determining your relative weaknesses on strength work, breaking down sanctionals programming or games programming, energy systems testing and analysis, and a whole lot more. And if this sounds like stuff that you're into, you can get a 7-day free trial of Pro. Simply head over to zorfitness.com/pro. Thanks for listening, and as always, stay the course.